Hey guys, Big P. So Pearl is going to be our first drip marketed unit in HSR's version 4.6, which is actually going to be taking place after the live stream titled Goodbye to All of Planet Arcadia. So I'm not really exactly sure how the story is going to be progressing from there, since they are looking to tease the end of Planet Arcadia itself. So maybe we'll see her along Astropolis, since that's going to be where the IPC Resort Island is going to be, and that is pretty much it, right? So for this particular instance, her lore is going to be as shown over here. Our work investment specialist working for the IPC strategic department and Plan Arcadia's current CEO. So you can start with my hour to get to know each other better, color the stars and trace the myriad phenomena, and lost pearls of civilization regain their luster. Born from the art of analysis, she'll pursue the pinnacle of beauty, which is, the beauty guy. Maybe, who knows? Yet has never lost her underlying hue of the preservation. So this particular little line right here is something that potentially could hint to me that she is going to be the Elation sustain. And one other post that I kind of think was very interesting is that if you take a look into our little farming domain right here, so this is something that was really interesting, which is if you were to farm the Echoes of War for the current set, it is going to be the Elation set, right? The little 4-piece magical girl, as well as the Dunghane set, right? So this was the previous shield set that you're gonna be using for both DHPT as well as even base adventuring to give yourself a little bit more of a buff. So now that we have confirmation that Pearl is in fact going to be our Elation unit, with underlying ties where they literally say she never lost her hue of the preservation, I personally think she is most likely going to be the actual Elation sustain for version 4 as well as Elation as a whole, right? So this is going to be first place in repair artifacts in the cosmos, as well as I'll be right here to catch you. So taking a look into her actual artwork, and yes, that is going to be another Ice Elation with the little pearl right underneath the name, so that's going to be pretty appropriate to the name itself. She is going to be holding on this little, not really little, a very large brush that we have seen her using in the previous instances of our Planet Arcadia story, which I'm assuming this is also going to be doubling as like somewhat of a spear, like a long spear kind of weapon, and then this is going to be her kind of flying or like dancing about as a clanker, because you can clearly see the mechanical movements from like the feet, right, the shoes, right, even her fingers. So that's going to be very nice, as well as I guess if you take a closer look right here, I would say she's gonna be probably along the lines of between D Herta as well as Ron May in terms of if you know, you know, right? And then this is also gonna be with a lot of the artwork that I'm assuming that she has something to do with regards to drawing. Also a little bit of ties to Murata, right? How Murata is also gonna be an artist to draw the tapestry and everything. And I have a couple of fishes here and there, which is quite interesting to show a little bit more of like her ties with water, because her entire outfit is gonna be more blue, a little bit like wavy, aqua-like, and that is pretty much gonna be the overall artwork for Pro, right? Okay, so for this portion of this video, I'm just gonna be discussing what I feel might be happening with Pearl's kit going forward, right? So as of right now, we should know by now that every single one of the Elation units can kind of just work with one another. That is pretty much going to be Silver, Wolf, Evanesia, Sparksy, as well as Yao Yao, right? So the key factor that we are lacking for an Elation team right now, especially if we want to draw parallel with the Mimo sprites, right, the Mimo slot team, is gonna be the sustain slot. So there at this point are two potential scenarios, one of which is Pearl is going to be an Elation support, and then Aventurine is gonna be an Elation sustain, or Pearl is gonna be the Elation sustain and Aventurine is either gonna be going for an alternate path. So for example, you know like how Break has like 3 potential different break DPS, like Boot Hill, Rabba, as well as Firefly. I think there might be a potential where Elation could follow a very similar route. So we do have 2 main DPS already, and that is going to be Evanesia as well as Silverwolf. Generally speaking, you wouldn't really run both of them in the same team unless you want to do like some sustainers E2 high cost 0 cycles. Then they could work with one another, which I have done before. But at a baseline, most cost-effective way of playing Elation is definitely just committing for a single Elation main DPS, giving them the support sustain as well as a sub DPS slot to make their entire team self. So with them being established, if you are gonna be going for, let's just say Yao Yao is gonna be mandatory in this current slot right here, and then we do have ourselves an EMC slot, which is eventually, I'm assuming, gonna be replaced by a stronger EMC, just like how Fuke did it for HMC as well as how Cyrene did it for RMC. In their respective counterparts in like break slot as well as Mimo slot respectively. So I think that EMC slot is probably going to be someone else in the future that can support as well. So that means you are going to be having one main DPS, one Yao Guang, one Elation sustain, and one EMC slot. I think that's pretty much going to be the team building for all of the Elation. At this current point of time, you can use Sparksy over EMC for Silverwolf 99, but that is going to be a topic for an entirely different video, especially with regards to cost maxing. But there is one slot that is definitively gonna see a very, very nice replacement. That is gonna be the current Huo slot for Evanesia, or if you're gonna be using Huo for Silverwolf, then an Elation sustain is gonna be offering us a lot more value, because at this current point of time, Huo's 20% energy regeneration is just completely irrelevant for Silverwolf 99. So we do need another sustain that can give us additional either punchlines, speed, right, aha instances, anything along those lines would be of extremely high value to an Elation team. So I personally feel that for whatever that Elation sustain slot is going to be, for any Elation main player, this is pretty much going to be a very, very good investment, especially if you want to play with an Elation as a whole. That being said, I do personally feel that for Elation so far, the reliance on running an Elation sustain is not going to be as high compared to, for example, Mimo sprites, right, Castoris, because Castoris running that with a hyacinth is almost mandatory to actually run her entire team and her archetype, right? If you do not have a hyacinth Castoris, it is almost like unplayable because your entire team will pretty just kill themselves, right, in game. So for Elation, on the other hand, there has been a lot of different instances of a sustainless run. It might not be especially applicable for like casual players or like the free-to-play players with like suboptimal gear and costs. Then you generally still want to run a sustain, but for more of the high-end players between the late game cost investments as well as gear investments, sustainless Elation has been a very, very popular setup for both Silverwolf as well as Evanesia, and to some extent there are even some instances of a Sparksy main DPS if you want to think about it as well. So the actual value of a sustain in an Elation team, I personally feel is probably not going to be as high compared to a Mimo Sprite flagship team. However, if you were a player that wants to use a sustain, I would say getting yourself that Elation sustain is still going to be incredibly valuable. Just like how, for example, you could go for a sustainless Evernight, right? That is still viable, but it is not really recommended for players who don't really have enough investments. And if you do want to get a sustain with Evernight, then Hyacinth is pretty much going to be the best in slot option. DHPT is going to be using shields, and all the other units are just not going to be as viable, right? So that is going to be my 2 cents on Elation sustain as a whole, and whether or not you as a player should be pulling for an Elation sustain, right? Now, with that out of the way, Pearl herself, right? So this is gonna be for Pearl herself, what her value might be if she's gonna be coming out as a 4.6 first unit of all time. Let's just assume in 2 respective scenarios, right? Scenario number 1, I feel Pearl is most likely gonna be the actual Elation sustain. Number 1, because of her ties to the preservation, and number 2, we do have a little bit of a hint that if we are gonna be farming for the domains, the sustain slot is gonna be using a shield 4-piece, which I personally feel is gonna be timed quite nicely, since almost every single preservation unit is gonna be making use of some form of shields, right? Other than Fuxuan, but that is pretty much the case so far. So if Pearl is also gonna be another Elation sustain, having another shielder would also make more sense considering the amount of healing sustains we have gotten in the game. So you have Luocha, right? You have your Huo, right? You have your Hyacinth, right? And we have not gotten another shielding sustain ever since DHPT, unless you want to consider Aventurine as well as Japart. Now, Aventurine was a unit all the way back in version 2, and we have not gotten anything else in the entirety of version 4. In fact, version 4 has not gotten any sustain period. So if we are going to be seeing our first ever sustained unit to be released with Tiles of Preservation, I think it would make quite a bit of sense for Pearl herself to be giving us the additional shield, right? So maybe, for example, if she's gonna be like a dedicated sustain slot for our Elation team comps, then any target that we have gotten a shield, maybe we get a little bit more punch lines, maybe we get a little bit more speed because Aha speed is gonna be tied to your team-wide speed, right? Maybe some kind of like a rest pen or vulnerability or like Aha damage or Elation buff, right? Elation percent, right? Because Elation percent is a pretty rare field to obtain, since the general census right now that we can actually get Elation percentage is basically Yao Guang as well as RMC as a support slot, right? So that I feel will be most likely tied to Pearl's kit if she's gonna be an Elation sustain. I'm not really exactly sure she's gonna be doing DPS herself, but because she is Ice Elation, right, she is going to be another Elation unit. It means that every single time Aha slot is gonna, Aha instance is gonna trigger, then she will be having her very own Elation skill as well. So for that sense, generally so far, every single Elation skill has been a straight up DPS except for RMC. Actually, even RMC is going to be another DPS, even though it's not super high, but every single Elation skill so far has been dealing damage against the enemy target, right? So if Pearl herself is going to be dealing damage as well, I hope to get somewhat of a hybrid between utility support, like for example, Yao Guang's Elation skill is going to be giving us additional rest pen when she lands the debuff, and then for Pearl, maybe if she were to let go of her Elation skill, she could increase some kind of like a vulnerability or defense down against target, right? And defense down for this particular field, I feel it is pretty important because you can kind of see how a lot of our Elation DPS, the 4-piece magical girl, has built-in defense down. So if there is gonna be another support or sustain slot that can actually provide us a little bit more of a defense down stacking, I think that will make a lot of sense. So on the contrary, if you were to take a look into, for example, like Casterus, right, Evernight, they both have built-in defense down in their kits, which allows them to stack on very nicely, which is also another reason why Evernight's Light Cone, right, Evernight's placement as a whole, is synergizes so well with Casterus because Casterus as one gives her defense down, right? But unfortunately for all of the Mimo slot main DPS, none of them have a very high degree of defense down stacking because they seem to be way more focused on true damage, which is what Cyrene is gonna be coming to do based on her true damage capabilities, right? Then for Elation as a whole, we actually have not gotten any instance of true damage so far, unless you want to factor in Yao Guang's E6, which is going to be this term called merrymaking. So I think merrymaking is going to be the true damage variation for Elation itself, and if Pearl is going to be able to provide this as a sustain, I think that's just absolutely absurd. But I think they're probably going to be reserving this field of a unique damage multiplier for an upcoming EMC upgrade that may or may not be shown in the next drip marketing, and that is pretty much going to lead me to the last point. I feel that the next unit that's going to be dropping less than 24 hours from now, unless they only release a single unit in version 4.6, but if they are going to be dropping two different banners back to back, then I feel that is probably going to be Nihilux, right? We have pretty much seen every single of the 7 different, or almost every single of the original Aha, right? So you have the Silver Wolf, Evanesia, Yao Guang, Sparksea, Pearl, as well as Asheville. Even though Asheville is not going to be an Elation unit, but that is pretty much the teaser, right? The last unit out of the 7 that has not been shown so far, that is going to be Nihilux. And we do have another broadcast that says goodbye to all of Planet Arcadia, so I kind of just have to assume that Planet Arcadia is probably going to be coming to a close at 4.6. if not 4.7, giving us a little bit of ties back into new Amphorius, which we have been teased from the ending of 3.7. So I think 4.6 is most likely going to be the last addition for our Elation upgrade as a whole. And what tends to happen for the 0.7 patch of every single banner so far, you can see from 3.7, and I guess you could consider 2.7, which is going to be with Sunday and Fugue, they start to lean a little bit more towards the next version update. So for 3.7, Cyrene was the last version, but 3.8 was Dahlia, which buffed Super Break, right? Then 2.6 was like kind of like the last version for Panic Cunning, right, with Rabas Breaknot. Then 2.7 was Fugue as well as Sunday, with Fugue buffing Super Break as well as Sunday, potentially bringing up the future archetypes, right? So if 4.6 is going to be the last addition for Planet Arcadia with the Elation sustains, right, Elation support, whatever it's going to be, then I could potentially see 4.7 being the very, very last installment for version 4 as a whole. Maybe a little bit more of a throwback towards Amphorius. Maybe we could have some upgrades towards the Amphorius characters before jumping into version 5. So that might be a case. So for example, 4.7, there could be one unit that buffs your version 3 DPS, and then one other unit in 4.7 is going to be buffing our future version 5 DPS archetypes, which has been kind of reminiscent of like MiHoYo's Followers so far, like how they released Sandrone, right, in Genshin Impact before version 7 Snatch Die actually came out, right? So that is pretty much gonna be my 2 cents of what it's gonna be. I'll be looking forward to see the drip marketing for tomorrow. I am guessing it's Nihilux, but if I'm not gonna be Nihilux, then it is what it is, right? Let me know what you guys think in the thoughts and comments below for pro drip marketing. World's update is gonna be, you know, Elation. Alright, join Twitch, join Discord, use code POKE in terms of gamer subs. All the best for guided pools, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye. Take care.